Also, he says, I know we cannot be expected to know exactly all of the things we have ever learned or to give perfect explanations off the cuff.
I love
This is so,
that.
it's so politely backhanded. But in referring to Cynthia Long Westfall's book, Paul and Gender, you neither named her nor the title of the book, nor gave the core portion of her interpretation
Dun,
of 1
dun,
Corinthians
dun,
14,
dun, 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 dun.
which was that Paul wanted women to be able to freely wear head coverings as symbols of feminine piety and faithfulness without men telling them to remove them. He was siding with
Right.
women who resisted men's efforts to unveil them with signaled sexual availability in Greco-Roman culture. You mention shame and women who may have been prostitutes, but you didn't relate this to wearing a veil or not wearing a veil. Which one is shameful? Question mark. Which would be a prostitute who is a believer want no, which would a prostitute who is a believer want to do? Question mark again. Also, you didn't point out what was in your head that the Greek exousion echein in 1 Corinthians 11:10 is consistently mistranslated, adding a whole word that effectively reverses the plain meaning of the Greek. Pladao. Go
Right.
ahead.
So I believe I understand what he's saying, and it's true. I couldn't remember the name of the book. Well, I think I remembered it was Paul and Gender, but it's Cynthia Long Westfall. For those into postmodern gender studies, no, I'm kidding. It's a really good book, I think, addressing 1 Corinthians and the woman covering her head. I understand her to be saying basically what Andre just said very clearly, that in the Greco-Roman world, basically, this is her argument, and I think Andre represents it accurately. And again, this was one of those things that was a little side note, and I appreciate Andre's kind rebuke.
Weights and measures.
Saying, look, you cited it, but you weren't accurate. And to be fair, we didn't plan on talking about her, so it was totally from memory. And that's far from perfect, my memory. That the women were women whose heads were shaven or not allowed to cover their head. In other words, there was some other social symbolism with head covering that was trying to be imposed of who could and who could not cover their head. And it had to do with men who were making judgments about these women. And my understanding is that is her argument, and I think it makes good sense, is that Paul is saying, let the women have authority over her own head, that she can let the women cover their head, and don't let anyone say, no, she can't have her head covered for whatever reason. She was a prostitute or whatever. And so again, it's a good point.
And in Corinth, this probably was a huge issue because in all likelihood, you had women who were Gentiles who were probably part of the temple cult as prostitutes who had come to Christ.
Yeah. And there could have been again, I haven't read this book for a couple of years, but I imagine too that it's possible that there are men like, we don't want just any women coming in here.
Right.
We need to see who they are. That it might not have been this idea of whether they were quote sexually available, which is what as Andre cites Westfall's comment. I think it was the idea of letting each woman decide for themselves whether they were going to cover their head or not. That's what I think it is. Not letting another person say, no, you can or you cannot. I could be wrong.
Yeah, my father takes a different view on this. There's an article that he wrote on Torah Resource about his view that it's talking about hair. And there is actually, I think that the last time I looked into this, and we talked about this on the show, but the last time I looked into this, I think that there's maybe 4, and I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me. I think that there's maybe four main views on what this passage in 1 Corinthians could be talking about. But yeah, I think that the view that you're taking and the view of hair is basically... Now, of course, what did the Christian church do? Especially with men, right? You don't walk into a church with your head covered. And this is the main reason. This is the main passage that's cited for that, which I think is really a misinterpretation. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button and check out more videos from Messiah Matters.